On my wedding day, my sister paid the DJ to play embarrassing childhood recordings. The music cut and suddenly my 10-year-old voice screeched through the speakers. "Mommy, I peed my pants." The recording blared. Everyone burst out laughing, but then the best man stood up and said, "Enough. This isn't funny." During my wedding reception, right as the dinner was starting, the music cut out. Suddenly, a recording of my 10-year-old self blared through the speakers, crying about peeing my pants. Everyone laughed, everyone except the best man, who stood up and called it out as cruel. Turns out, my sister paid the DJ to do it. Now months later, she's trying to reconnect, but I'm torn between forgiving her and protecting my peace. I remember staring at the fairy lights woven into the old oak tree, watching them sway gently in the summer breeze, thinking how perfect everything was. It was early evening at Willow Creek Vineyard in Pennsylvania, and my wedding day had, so far, been nothing short of magical. Jonah, my husband, had just pulled me onto the dance floor for our first dance. We spun slowly to a song we picked out together months ago, a soft, classic tune we both loved. My mother wiped away a tear discreetly, my father stood stiff but smiling, and my sister Serena leaned lazily against the bar, sipping champagne. I caught her eye as we danced, offering a small smile. She raised her glass in a mock toast, her expression unreadable. I thought nothing of it at the time. Serena had always been complicated. When the dance ended, the guests clapped politely, and we made our way to the long rustic tables set up for dinner. Plates clinked. Wine flowed. Laughter bubbled under the dusky sky. Then, mid-conversation with my old college roommate, the music stopped. A few confused murmurs spread through the crowd. Jonah looked toward the DJ booth, eyebrows raised. Curtis, the local DJ we hired, fiddled with the soundboard. And then the speakers hissed with static. Without warning, my childhood voice shrieked through the vineyard. "Mommy, I peed my pants." For a moment, there was stunned silence. Then the entire room erupted into laughter. Not just a few chuckles, it was roaring, belly-clutching, glass-clinking laughter. My Uncle Jerry slapped his knee so hard I thought he'd topple over. I froze, my fork halfway to my mouth. Jonah shot me a bewildered look, not understanding. My face burned, hot enough to melt the heavy makeup layered on by the stylist earlier. Another squeaky, distorted snippet played. "It's on the floor. It's on the floor. I'm sorry, Mommy." I squeezed my eyes shut. It felt like the earth tilted underneath me. I didn't have to look to know who was behind it. Curtis eventually cut the recording off mid-squeal, looking panicked. Then Luke, Jonah's best man and oldest friend, stood up. His tall, broad-shouldered frame commanded attention without him even raising his voice. "Enough," he said, calm but firm. "This isn't funny." The laughter faltered, fading into a thick, awkward silence. I dared a glance at Serena. She leaned casually against her chair, a half-smile tugging at her lips, twirling her champagne flute by the stem like it was just another night out. Jonah reached for my hand under the table. His palm was warm and steady. It was the only thing that kept me from getting up and running out into the vineyard. The rest of the night passed in a blur. I forced smiles. I danced when people pulled me to the floor. I cut the cake with a knife that felt heavy and foreign in my hand. Every moment after that recording felt hollowed out, like someone had scooped the joy from my chest and left a brittle shell. When the guests started to thin and the sky turned ink black, I finally found Serena standing near the parking lot, heels dangling from her fingers. "You think that was funny?" My voice cracked despite myself. She rolled her eyes, taking a lazy drag from a cigarette. "Oh, come on. It's just a joke, Ava. Don't be such a drama queen." "You humiliated me," I said, fighting to keep my voice low. "You always were so sensitive," she said, blowing smoke into the cool night air. "God forbid someone reminds you you're not Little Miss Perfect." Her words sliced through me more deeply than I wanted to admit. This wasn't just about the tape. This was about every year we'd grown up together, the invisible ledger she'd kept, every time I succeeded where she failed, Every time I got attention she thought she deserved. I turned without another word. I refused to cry in my wedding dress. Jonah found me later sitting barefoot on the damp grass, my dress pulled around me like an abandoned tent. He didn't ask questions. He just sat down beside me, looping an arm around my shoulder. "We can leave if you want," he said quietly. I shook my head. I wasn't going to let her steal any more from me. The next morning, we packed up what was left of the decorations. Empty wine bottles. Discarded heels. Crumpled napkins. I avoided my parents, who wore identical expressions of strained politeness. My mother tried to brush it off. Over coffee at their kitchen table, she offered me a tight smile. "Serena just gets carried away. She didn't mean any harm." I stared down at my mug, swirling the dark coffee around and around. She did. She meant every second of it. Over the following weeks, Serena's attempts at damage control arrived. First a text with a laughing emoji. Then a voicemail that started with "Okay, maybe that was a little much," and ended with "Come on, you know I love you." I didn't answer. I told myself it was because I was busy, with the honeymoon in Italy, settling into the new apartment, getting back to work. But the truth was, I didn't know if I could even look at her without remembering how she laughed while the rest of the world laughed at me too. Family gatherings became minefields. Thanksgiving passed with a few stilted greetings and a lot of silent eating. Christmas was worse. She tried to give me a gift, a framed photo of us as kids, and I barely managed a polite thank you before moving across the room. I heard through the grapevine that things weren't going great for her. Serena lost her job at the local accounting firm. She and her boyfriend, a surly mechanic named Vince, broke up after a public screaming match outside the tavern on Main. Small towns never forget, and Redfield is no exception. It should have made me feel vindicated. Maybe even satisfied. But mostly, it just made me tired. And then the letter arrived. A real, honest-to-God handwritten letter, smudged slightly with what I think was either tears or spilled coffee. In it, Serena laid herself bare in a way she never had before. She wrote about feeling left behind. About watching me succeed, feeling like everyone forgot about her. About how, that night at the wedding, she wanted to knock me down a peg because seeing me so happy made her feel unbearable things. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness," she wrote. "But I miss my sister. I miss us." I read it twice. Then a third time. I sat on the floor of our little apartment, Benny, the mutt Jonah and I adopted after the honeymoon, curling into my lap as if he knew I needed grounding. Forgiveness is a funny thing. It's not just about deciding someone deserves it. It's about deciding you deserve peace. But peace felt very far away. I didn't write back. I didn't call. I just sat with the letter for days. At night, I'd lie awake staring at the ceiling, the words repeating in my head. I miss my sister. I miss us. I missed her too, in some small, stubborn part of me. I missed the way we used to sneak downstairs on Christmas Eve to peek at the presents, the way she used to braid my hair before school dances. Those moments felt like another lifetime, blurry and unreachable. Jonah noticed before I even said anything. "You've been quiet lately," he said one evening as we sat on the couch, half watching a cooking show we both liked. Benny snoozed between us, snoring softly. I shrugged, picking at a loose thread on my sweater. "Is it about Serena?" he asked gently. I nodded. He didn't push. Jonah never pushed. He just shifted closer, resting his chin on my shoulder in that easy way of his. "You don't have to decide anything tonight," he murmured. But the truth was, every hour I didn't decide felt like I was deciding. Choosing distance by default. About a week later, my mother invited us over for Sunday dinner. It was a Monroe family tradition, one that had survived teenage rebellions, college moves, even the pandemic. Skipping it would raise eyebrows. When we pulled into the driveway, my stomach twisted. Serena's car was already there, parked crookedly, as if even her parking job screamed "I don't care." Inside, the house smelled like roast beef and garlic bread. Familiar and safe, and yet I felt like an intruder in my own memories. We took our seats at the table, the old oak thing scarred with decades of hot pots and carving knives. My father said grace, his voice steady and practiced. Then dinner began. At first, it was stiff, everyone carefully skirting around real conversation. Jonah asked my father about fishing trips. My mother complimented the wine. I passed the bread basket to Serena without looking her in the eye. About halfway through the meal, Serena cleared her throat. I sent you something, she said, voice tight. The clink of cutlery slowed but didn't stop. I nodded slightly. I got it. Silence stretched across the table like a rubber band ready to snap. Serena set down her fork. I meant it, you know. I met her gaze for the first time in months. There was no defiance in her expression now. No smirking superiority. Just raw, twitchy nerves. I didn't say anything. I didn't trust myself to. My mother, ever the peacekeeper, jumped in quickly. We're just happy you're both here. The conversation limped along after that, but the air never really cleared. When dinner ended, Jonah excused himself to walk Benny around the block, and I found myself alone in the kitchen with Serena as we scraped plates into the sink. You hate me, she said suddenly, voice low. I didn't correct her. I didn't say no, I don't hate you. Because hate would have been easier, cleaner. What I felt was more complicated, a messy tangle of betrayal, love, grief, and disappointment. You hurt me, I said instead, wiping my hands on a dish towel. I know. We stood there for a long moment, the only sound the hum of the dishwasher. I thought if I made you look small, she said finally, maybe I wouldn't feel so left behind. There it was. The raw center of it all. It wasn't really about me. It was about her, drowning quietly while everyone cheered for me from the shore. I didn't have words for what I felt. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But maybe understanding. And sometimes, that's the beginning. We didn't hug. We didn't cry. This wasn't a movie. When Jonah came back in, Serena nodded once at me and left. Later that night, lying in bed, Jonah traced lazy circles on my back with his fingers. You okay? He asked. I thought about it. Really thought about it. I don't know, I said finally. And that was okay too. The following weeks were strange. Serena started texting me once every few days, nothing deep, just funny memes, pictures of new coffee shops opening in town, random memories. I didn't always respond. Sometimes I just stared at the messages, feeling a complicated ache in my chest. One afternoon, she sent me a picture of a battered pink cassette tape. Look familiar? The caption read. It was the tape. The same one she had used at my wedding to humiliate me. Underneath the photo, a second text, thinking of burning this. Thought you should know. I stared at my phone for a long time before putting it face down on the counter. I didn't tell her to do it. I didn't tell her not to. Some things you have to decide for yourself. A few days later, Jonah and I ran into her at the farmer's market. She was standing in front of a honey booth, sunglasses perched on her head, trying to haggle down a price with the poor teenager manning the stall. When she spotted us, she hesitated. Then, to my surprise, she gave a small, sheepish wave. I waved back. A small thing. A simple thing. But my chest felt lighter afterward, like I had exhaled a breath I didn't even know I was holding. We didn't fall back into an easy sisterhood overnight. There were no grand apologies, no emotional reckoning over coffee. But tiny steps began to form. A casual lunch here. A shared joke there. Still, part of me stayed guarded. Walls don't come down just because you want them to. They crumble slowly, with cautious hands and time. I found myself thinking about that night more and more, the recording, the laughter, Luke standing up and saying enough. The way everyone had laughed so easily, so carelessly, like I was a punchline and not a person. I found myself thinking about forgiveness. About how everyone acts like it's this noble, inevitable thing. But sometimes, forgiveness isn't a gift you give someone else. Sometimes, it's the weight you put down so you can finally walk away lighter. The following month, my parents organized a barbecue at the house. The kind they used to throw when we were kids, fold-out chairs dotting the backyard, my dad at the old blackened grill, cheap beer sweating in coolers. At first, I thought about not going. Jonah and I were busy enough with work, the apartment needed cleaning, and frankly, I didn't feel like sitting through another family gathering pretending everything was fine. But Jonah, with his quiet wisdom, simply said, it might help. So we went. The backyard was just like I remembered it, the same sagging hammock between the two oaks, the same lumpy yard with half-hearted patches of grass where Dad never bothered to replant. My mother fussed with trays of deviled eggs and homemade lemonade. Aunts and uncles milled about, the same ones who had roared with laughter at the wedding. I smiled. I made conversation. I stayed near Jonah's side like a lifeline. Then I spotted Serena. She was standing near the fence, wearing a simple blue sundress, arms crossed tight across her stomach like she was holding herself together. For a moment, our eyes met. Neither of us moved. Eventually, I turned away and focused on helping my mother carry dishes inside. Inside, the house was blessedly quieter. I stacked plates in the kitchen while Mom rinsed off watermelon rinds. I'm glad you came, she said over her shoulder. Yeah, I said, non-committal. There was a pause, a heavy one. You know, she continued, voice lighter than it should have been, Serena's been trying. She's going to counseling now. Got a new job too, front desk at Dr. Mill's office. I said nothing. People change, Mom added softly, as if to herself. I wanted to believe that. But change, real change, doesn't happen in a few therapy sessions or a new job. It's in the little things, the way someone shows up, or doesn't. When I went back outside, Serena was sitting alone on one of the faded lawn chairs, balancing a paper plate of food on her knees. She looked awkward and small, nothing like the towering force she used to be in my memories. I felt a tug of something in my chest. Pity? Sadness? Nostalgia? Maybe all of it. Later, after most of the guests had left, and the cicadas were buzzing thick in the trees, I found myself sitting across from her at the picnic table. We didn't plan it. It just happened. Like gravity pulling two heavy things together. Neither of us spoke for a while. The night air was humid, the scent of charcoal still hanging between us. Finally, Serena cleared her throat. Remember when we used to come out here with flashlights and pretend we were camping? I smiled despite myself. You always made me be the lookout. Because you were too chicken to go first, she teased, a flash of old mischief in her eyes. The memory flickered warmly between us. Then the moment passed. She looked down at her plate, picking at a corner of the soggy hamburger bun. I didn't know how to say it, she said quietly. Say what? I asked, even though I already knew. That I was jealous. That I felt invisible. I let the words hang there. You weren't invisible, I said finally. You were just different. She gave a bitter little laugh. Different doesn't get you first dances. Or parents bragging at church. Or a new apartment with someone who actually loves you. It was cruel, but it was honest. And somehow, that made it hurt less. I didn't steal any of that from you, I said. I know. Silence again. Heavy, but not suffocating this time. We sat there, two women who used to be girls chasing fireflies, now grown and scarred in ways neither of us fully understood. Later that night, driving home, Jonah reached over and squeezed my hand. You're doing better than you think, he said. Maybe I was. Still, the ache in my chest didn't go away. Healing isn't linear, I was learning that. It's messy and unfair and full of days when forgiveness feels 1,000 miles away. Some mornings, I'd wake up and feel almost normal, ready to text Serena back, maybe suggest coffee. Other days, I'd open my phone, see a message from her, a meme, a dumb joke, and feel my stomach turn. I was allowed to move slow. I was allowed to protect myself. Still, there was a stubborn part of me that remembered what it used to be like before resentment grew roots between us. Before weddings and humiliations and letters soaked in regret. There were moments, small, fleeting, when I let myself hope. Hope that maybe we weren't completely broken. Hope that maybe some things could be salvaged. But I also knew better than to rush and blindly again. Not every story has a clean reunion. Not every scar fades neatly into the background. Some stay tender forever. It was a few months later when the opportunity came. I wasn't looking for revenge. Not really. I'd settled into a kind of uneasy peace with Serena, not friends, but not enemies either. Occasionally, we texted. Occasionally, we met for coffee. It was civil. Careful. Then my parents announced they were throwing a big anniversary party, 35 years married, and they wanted the whole family involved. Serena's in charge of the slideshow, Mom said on the phone, her voice bright and oblivious. Maybe you can help her? I almost laughed out loud. But I agreed to help, mostly because it felt easier than explaining why I didn't want to. The plan was simple, a big slideshow of family memories, childhood vacations, birthdays, holidays, to play during the party. Safe, sentimental, boring. We met at my parents' house one Saturday to sort through old photo albums. Serena brought her laptop, I brought coffee for us both. At first, it was almost easy. We flipped through yellowing pages, laughing at hideous 90s fashion, cringing at our braces and bad haircuts. Then we hit the wedding album. My wedding album. There, tucked between photos of Jonah and me cutting the cake and dancing under the lights, was a shot someone had snapped right after the recording incident, me sitting at the table, face flushed with humiliation, fake smile plastered on, while the crowd laughed around me. The memory hit like a absorber punch. Serena saw me stiffen. Her fingers paused on the trackpad. I'm sorry, she muttered, eyes fixed on the screen. Really? I was an idiot. I nodded stiffly. Not ready to have that conversation again. Instead, I flipped another page, and that's when I saw it. A picture of Serena from her 8th grade dance, wearing a bright purple dress, braces gleaming, arm around her date, Daniel Kinney. Daniel Kinney, who had broken up with her 3 weeks later, threw a note past in algebra class, because she'd tripped on stage during the talent show and landed face first in the principal's lap. Serena had cried for days. Mom had to practically drag her out of bed. I remembered every detail. And suddenly, I knew exactly what to do. I didn't act right away. No, revenge, if it was going to be sweet, needed patience. Subtlety. Over the next few weeks, I helped Serena polish the slideshow. She was grateful, maybe even a little relieved. Trust built slowly between us again, or so she thought. The night of the party arrived. Family and friends packed into the banquet hall at the Redfield Community Center. String lights hung from the rafters. Tables were draped in white cloths, topped with simple centerpieces my mom made herself. Jonah squeezed my hand as we walked in. You sure you want to do this? He asked, not judgmental, just cautious. I smiled. I'm not going to ruin anything. I'm just making a point. He chuckled low under his breath. I married a scary woman. The dinner passed without incident. Laughter, toasts, mediocre buffet food. Then, finally, the lights dimmed, and Serena wheeled out her laptop to start the slideshow. Soft piano music played as photos flickered across the screen, mom and dad on their wedding day, baby pictures, family vacations, birthdays. Everyone clapped and cooed at the right moments. And then, right after a sweet shot of us as little girls building a snowman, it appeared, the video. I had found it buried deep in an old home movie file, Serena's 8th grade talent show disaster, fully preserved in grainy VHS glory. There she was, on the projector screen, stepping forward nervously in her purple dress. There was the moment her heel caught on the microphone cord. There was the stumble, the wild flailing, the shriek as she fell straight into the principal's lap. The entire room burst into stunned laughter. It wasn't cruel, the way they laughed. It was familiar, affectionate, the way people laugh at a ridiculous story that's safe and far enough away not to sting anymore. Serena's face turned the color of ripe tomatoes. But I didn't look away. I met her eyes across the room, calm and steady. For a moment, she looked like she might explode. Then, slowly, stiffly, she started to laugh too. Awkward, at first. Forced. But it grew, softening into something real. She knew. She knew exactly what this was. Not cruelty. Not vengeance. Just balance. When the slideshow ended, she found me by the punch table. "You little witch," she said under her breath, but there was a strange lightness to her voice. A hint of admiration, even. "Payback's a witch," I said sweetly, sipping my punch. She laughed, a real laugh, the kind I hadn't heard in years. "You got me good," she admitted. "I learned from the best." Later, after the party wound down and Jonah and I made our way home under the stars, he slid an arm around my shoulders. "You feel better?" he asked. I thought about it, really thought about it. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel cruel. I felt lighter. I hadn't needed to scream, or fight, or cut her out forever. I just needed her to understand how it felt. And now she did. Not every wound needs to stay open forever. Some, if you're lucky, can finally scar over, ugly, imperfect, but closed. I leaned my head against Jonah's shoulder and smiled. "Yeah," I said. "I really do."